Welcome to episode 9 of the Motorcar Marketing Podcast. I'm Ashley Myers with motorcarmarketing.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm going to be interviewing Terry Lancaster. Terry has years of experience in automotive marketing, especially in traditional media like television and radio. His company, Instant Events, produces radio and television spots for car dealers, and he drops some great tips for dealers who are thinking about doing this type of advertising. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help us out by giving us a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast, so it's very much appreciated. If you have any questions or comments about anything, feel free to send us an email at info@motorcarmarketing.com. I want to improve this podcast, so some honest, constructive feedback is very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on the website in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.motorcarmarketing.com/podcasts. If you'd like to get our free video selling more cars on Craigslist, just go to www.motorcarmarketing.com and put in your name and email address into the form in the sidebar. The guide goes through all the recent Craigslist changes and shows you some actual statistics from dealerships who post heavily on Craigslist, both now and last year before the big changes were rolled out. So if you're wondering if you should still be posting your cars on Craigslist or wondering how to get more value out of Craigslist ads, definitely check out this free video. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm talking with automotive marketing expert Terry Lancaster. Here is the interview. Welcome, Terry, to the Motorcar Marketing Podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Ashley, thanks for having me, buddy. I'm stoked to be here.
So I wonder, to start out, if you can give us a quick overview of your career and how you got into automotive advertising.
Well, I was working in college. I worked my way through college the last couple of years as a disc jockey, and I figured out pretty early that the disc jockeys were not the driving force in the radio business, that if I wanted to make any money, I had to sell advertising. So when I got out of school, I went into advertising sales, and I graduated from Tennessee Tech in Cookeville, Tennessee, and got a job with a company out in Nashville that owned radio stations all over the South, and they moved me to Tupelo, Mississippi. So I'm just a big city boy from Nashville, Tennessee. They dropped me off in Tupelo, Mississippi, and I'm like the guy with two heads. One of my first days in business, I walked into the local Ford store. And I walk in, and I start trying to sell the guy some advertising, and he tells me I'm not interested. And I keep talking. I've learned all the yes but strategies. I know how to keep selling. I know persistence. I keep talking, and finally he said, "Son, I done told you I'm not buying the advertising, and you need to get the blank out of my store." Now I don't think he was actually going to pull a gun. I was afraid he might. So I got out of the store, and I immediately went across the street to the Mazda dealer and started talking to him. And I turned the Mazda dealer into my biggest customer. The Ford dealer ended up going out of business. And the factory took it over. When the factory took it over, they sent new managers in. I went back and talked to the managers at the Ford store. This was Friendly Ford, Tupelo, Mississippi. When Ford took it over, they became Metro Ford. Metro Ford became my number one customer, and I became kind of the automotive specialist. I got a job from there in Memphis, Tennessee, at the most powerful radio station in the nation, FM 100, and I became their automotive specialist. A couple of years go by, and I'm working for a lot of dealers, and I start doing advertising strictly for them. I started we added radio and TV and newspaper, and I started working with dealers all over the country, and that was in 1995. So Instant Events has been doing nothing but automotive advertising for the last 20 years.
Huh. Now, was there a reason when you're working for a radio station, is there a reason why you specifically went after the automotive, segment?
Well, they at the time and even today, if you turn on any radio station in the country, every other spot is going to be a car spot. And I decided very early on I wanted to follow the money. That's where the money was. So I started concentrating on the car business. Actually, at the time, I concentrated on two things. I called it cars and bars. I had car dealers and nightclubs. I was working for a top 40 station, and cars and bars. That's where the money was. So I started learning those businesses, and then I just dropped the bars and went strictly into cars.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a minute. Now, on the impact that the internet has had on the newspaper business, maybe you can talk to that a little bit.
The impact of the internet on the newspaper business is the internet has basically put the newspaper business out of business. In 1995, when we started Instant Event, car dealers spent, on average, 60 to 70% of every dollar they spent on advertising, they spent in the newspaper. When I was selling radio, I was fighting over scraps, and I learned pretty quickly that if I wanted to be in the automotive business, I had to be in the newspaper business. And we only got into business because we figured out a way to do newspaper ads for dealers all over the country quickly and easily. That was in 1995. The internet came along a few years later, and gradually it started eating away at that. And today, the newspaper business, car dealers spend about 15% of their advertising budget on the newspaper. And in any newspaper in the country, I worked at the National Tennessean for a couple of summers in college, and they had hundreds and hundreds of employees in this giant building downtown. That building is practically empty today, because the newspaper business is just dried up. And there's one specific reason for that car dealers need to recognize. Newspaper was extremely valuable 20 years ago because it was the battle for the low-hanging fruit. When people wanted to buy a car, they got up Saturday morning, they went and picked up the Saturday paper. Every dealer in town had an ad in the paper, and they looked through there like it was the Sears and Roebuck Christmas catalog for car buyers. They went through, they picked out the shiniest cars, and they went around from dealer to dealer until they got the car they wanted. Well, the low-hanging fruit these days is on the internet. When people decide they want to buy a car, they go look on the internet. That's where the research is done. That's where car buyers are shopping. So if you're trying to reach them at what they call the zero moment, the moment of truth when they're actually trying to make the decision, the internet is the place to be, and it's decimated the newspaper industry. And it's not just in the car business; it's in the jobs business, it's in the home business, it's in real estate. The newspaper classified business is basically gone. It's not even a fraction of what you see. It's probably down 90%, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a minute about now that we're talking about internet, let's talk a minute about sort of the strengths of the internet as far as marketing cars versus traditional media. When should a dealer use traditional media? When should they use the internet? And what are the strengths of each different type of advertising?
Well, one thing I say is you've got to use every tool in the shed to get the job done. Back in the good old days, you could just advertise in the newspaper, and you could spend the vast majority of your money there, and you'd be done. You'd have most of your bases covered. Maybe you spend a little money on radio, maybe you spend a little money on TV, but that was all you had. You had one newspaper, you had 3 TV stations, you had 5 radio stations in every market, and you had a couple of billboards. Those were your advertising options, and that's how you reach people. Today, you can't pick and choose, well, I'm going to use digital media, I'm going to use traditional media, I'm going to use this, that, or the other thing. You literally have to use everything. There's so many options that you can't pick one and hit everyone. The strength of digital media is the 1% of buyers who are in the market to buy a car right now. So that's when you're using pay-per-click, when you're using Craigslist, when you're using search marketing, search engine optimization. That's all to get people who are buying cars right now. The problem with concentrating on that, and you have to do that, and that's where you should spend probably most of your money. Right now, dealers spend about a third of every dollar that they spend goes into digital media of one form or another, and that's to reach right now buyers.
Now, but what you're saying is most dealers are spending a third of their money, but in your estimation, you think they should be spending like 2/3 of their money?
Well, I mean, every situation is different. I wouldn't begin to know what the right number is for everyone. It's a third right now, and it's growing, and I foresee it to grow for the considerable future. So every situation is different depending on what your budget is, what your market is, but your first dollar should probably go into digital advertising. Your first dollar is set out to reach those buyers who are in the market to buy right now. But if you're only reaching right now buyers, if you're only concentrating on using TrueCar, for instance, if you've got one of the services that sell you leads and you're spending, and I know a ton of dealers are spending a ton of money in Auto Trader and TrueCar, and they swear by it. They send them leads every month, and that's great. And then they close that, and they send a big check to Auto Trader with commissions on that every month. The problem is you're only promoting TrueCar and Auto Trader, and you're only reaching those buyers. You're not doing anything to build your business for the future. You're not doing anything to build your brand so that people think of you as the place to go buy a car. And instead, they look to Auto Trader as the place to go buy a car, and next week, Auto Trader might be pushing somebody else's business, and all of a sudden, you're just a delivery service hoping somebody sends you a lead.
Mm-hmm. So let's turn to some traditional media and talk about the strengths of that. I think you're kind of alluding to that about, more a longer term approach, but what are some of the strengths of television and radio ads?
Well, the strength of radio and television is exactly that. Digital media is reactive. People go to digital media once they've already made a decision, but something else drove them there. Maybe they decided to buy a car, maybe they heard an ad. A lot of online activity is driven by offline advertising. Offline advertising can interrupt and intrude. That's its strength. It's completely intrusive. It interrupts people's conversations. It jumps into their life, whereas digital advertising sits back and waits for something to happen. It waits for something to come look. Someone's coming to look for a car, they go to Craigslist. Someone's searching for Nashville Ford dealers, they go to Google and look at. But they're already looking for something when they found you. Then, if you wait to advertise when someone's already looking, when they're making a shopping list, you're probably not going to be on the list. The number of dealers that people visit has dropped from 6 or 7 dealers when they bought a car in the 90s to 1 point some odd dealers right now. People only visit one dealer or two. So if you're waiting to get on their shopping list till they make the shopping list, you're not going to be on the list. So you use radio and TV, you can interrupt and intrude, you can build your brand, you can insert yourself into their lives before they know they're looking for a car, and when they get ready to look for a car, then you're already on the list.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's dive into some of these specific things. Like we talked about newspapers. You said dealers are still spending about 15% on newspapers. So what are some tips you can give us for creating great newspaper ads?
Well, the newspaper is still valued in a lot of small markets, especially in smaller markets. The newspaper is the only way that local. There's not any local TV stations. The radio stations just play music. There's not a good, valuable resource for local news except for the newspaper. So the newspaper reach a lot of people. They also reach older people. That's radio and TV in general too. They reach an entirely different market. And I'll give you some specific tips about newspaper in a second, but let me say this. Traditional media reaches an older demographic than new media, digital media. And I think the statistic I've heard is 2 out of every 3 new cars is sold to someone over the age of 50. And those are the people who are using radio, TV, and specifically newspaper. But newspaper, back in the day, you wanted to have a classified ad in there. You wanted to have every car in your dealership listed. With every option and with every conceivable option, because that's what people were looking for. Well, today, that's on Craigslist and that's on Google. So the way the newspaper is used has changed, so we need to change the way that we're using the newspaper. Instead of listing every car with every option, we dial back on the number of cars that we put in the ad, and we try to use the newspaper now more like we use radio and TV, which is to create an event, to create an idea that something big is happening. So some specific tips or specific ideas are you still want to use a big, colorful ad because you got to get attention. You don't have to run full page ads. We've always run page killers, and we still do to this day. With a full page ad, a page killer, which is like 3/4 of an ad wide times 3/4 of a page tall. It only costs about half as much, and it will completely dominate the page in exactly the same way. So you take a page killer ad, which costs half the price of a full page ad. You run full color in. You put a great big headline in there that says "Great tent event, sale ends Monday." You got to put a deadline in there to create a sense of urgency, and the whole concept is to make it look like something big is going on. They're going to miss out if they're not down there buying a car now. So put a call to action, put a deadline, and create a sense of urgency.
Okay, good tips for sure. So let's talk about radio and what kind of tips you might have in terms of creating great radio ads?
Well, the same thing. The whole point is to make it look like something big is going on. And the key thing about radio and any other advertising is different gets noticed. You turn on the radio, and like I said before, every other ad is going to be a car ad. Car dealers are the number one, one of the number one categories on every radio station in the country. So there are a ton of car ads, but most of those car ads are just done by the local disc jockey. So you've got every other spot is a car ad. Every other spot is being done by the same disc jockeys who do every other ad, the same disc jockeys who read the weather, so they all sound the same.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get noticed, you have to be different. The first way to be different is to use a different voice. And now either you hire someone like my company to create a different voice, or if push comes to shove, most radio stations now are part of a group. Get your local radio. Say, hey, I don't want this produced by the local disc jockey. Have you got another disc jockey 2 towns over, or at some other station in your group that can produce the spot, so that my spot is different than every other spot on the radio. So use a different voice, and then go back to the same ideas. Create a sense of urgency, put a deadline in it, and put a call to action. Whether it's call, click, or come on down. Call us at our phone number, click on our website, or come on down and see us. You got to put a call to action to create the sense of urgency and make something happen. The voice is the big thing that people notice, but one thing that hardly anyone ever thinks about when they're making their radio spot is the actual production and the music that goes behind it. And this is kind of a trade secret, so you're getting some really secret sauce stuff here. Most of your local radio spots, they give the disc jockey the radio copy. He goes in, he reads it, he reaches over, he grabs a Kenny G album out of the shelf. He clicks the Kenny G CD in, he plays that song. He drops 30 seconds of instrumental music behind what he just read, and he's done. It's called rip and read. They're in and out. It's an assembly line. They want to get in and out as quick as possible, because for them producing the spot is just the hassle, the price they got to pay so they can be on the radio 4 hours a day. They have no interest in it. They want to get it done as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But what we like to do, and any professional producer is going to do this, they'll take the spot, they'll read it, and they'll cut it and slice it and dice it. And any spot I produce never has more than 4 or 5 seconds of continuous music in the background. And that's because different gets noticed, even subliminally. Your mind notices when something changes. So if the music in the background behind the voice is changing every 4 or 5 seconds, you got 4 or 5 seconds of music. You've got a pause where it's just the guy talking. Then you've got sound effects. And there's constant action and something changes going on. That gives the mind, 10 latches over a 60-second commercial. There'll be 10 chances for you to grab their attention, because every time something changes, your mind goes, hey, what's different now? So so you want that music and the sound effects and the blank spaces and the pauses. You want it all to keep changing, kind of keep everybody on the toes, keep guessing what's coming next. That way they're paying attention to what you say, and they get to the end of the spot, and they hear your call to action. The other most important, another tip here, I read a book a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, right when we were starting out. There was a car dealer who had gone into the advertising business, and his big suggestion was that never, ever, ever let anybody know you're doing a car spot till 5-10 seconds into the spot. And I've determined over the years that that's just crazy. You have to let them know. And maybe 20 years ago it was good advice when there was only 5 stations and people weren't quite as overloaded as everything there is now. But you have to let people know from the get-go, within the first 3 seconds, that this is a car ad, because you want the people who are interested in the cars, the 1% of people who are in the market right now to buy a car, you want them to catch the spot. So you want to say, this is a car ad. Hey, we've got great deals on great cars at Bob's Car Lot. And you want to say that up front and early. Otherwise, they're just going to tune it out. I used to kind of run a little experiment when I was in the car business. I'd be in the car with 4 or 5 people. Music would be playing, and the disc jockey would start talking. and he'd go into what we call the stop set, which is all the commercials that they play in a row. They play 4 or 5 commercials in a row. And I would let everybody in the car continue on with their conversation, and we just let the commercials run through. And at the end of the stop set, when they go back to music, I'd ask the people in the car with me, hey, what commercials just played? And without a doubt, no one heard all 4 or 5 commercials. Radio is intrusive, but it's in the background, and it kind of jumps out. People hear what they want to hear. So the guy who was looking for a car, he heard the spot from a car dealer. If there was a person who was looking for a home, well, they heard the spot from the bank about low mortgage rates. If there was one guy who was hungry, he heard the spot from the Subway about the $5 footlong. People hear what they're looking for, so you have to be pretty clear right up front. This is a car commercial. We've got great deals on great cars, but you better hurry because when they're gone, they're gone.
Mm-hmm. So good tip. That's great. So let's talk. Maybe you can give us some similar tips for television ads.
Well, TV. The big thing about TV. One thing I noticed. The great thing about TV is that it combines everything. There's visual advertising, there's audio advertising, and so many, not necessarily car dealers, but a lot of spots that you see, they don't take advantage of that. They treat TV like a pretty picture. Whereas, a lot of times when people are watching TV, they're going to the kitchen to fix a sandwich when the commercials come on, or they're going to the bathroom or something. So we want our commercials to be just as loud as our radio spots. We want to use every tool. We want to use the audio channel, and we want to use the video channel so that if they're not even seeing the commercial, they know that it's for Bob's Auto Lot. And if they've got it tuned down, or they've got it on their DVR and they're fast-forwarding through, I want the graphics to show them, well, this is for Bob's Auto Lot, and Bob's Auto Lot's having a great tent event, and I better get down there before Saturday. And you can pick all that up if you fast-forward through the spot at 2 times on your DVR, because all the graphics are going to be right there. So make everything just plain and simple. One of the biggest problems dealers use for advertising is they this comes down to their agency or their local TV station trying to pitch them something, but they end up wanting their TV spot to look like a Chevy spot. And there's basically 2 kinds of television advertising, any advertising really. There's image advertising, brand awareness advertising, which is what the factories do, and they spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on TV spots with pictures of beautiful cars driving down mountain roads and down beaches with beautiful women in them, their hair flowing back while they're drinking champagne, and they want to create an image. Well, car dealers aren't in the image business. They're in the selling cars business, and they need to use direct advertising, which is, sham wow, call before midnight, hurry in today. So car dealers advertising, they need to look more like a sham wow commercial than a Chevy commercial. It's great to create an image, but the image is going to be secondary. What we try to do is we try to have everything with a call to action and create right now buyers and use the residual effect of consistency, using the good voice, using the same logo, using the graphics, using a tagline, consistency to build the long-term buyer instead of just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on creating an image with puppy dogs and flowers and daffodils. Yeah, go ahead.
It's the same thing, though. These are sort of the second level details. The main thing is the same thing you've been talking about: a call to action and creating a sense of urgency by creating an event. Those are sort of the focus of all the advertising.
Absolutely. Every spot we do, every spot I do, whether it's radio, TV, newspaper, or direct mail, the entire purpose is to make it look like something big is going on that they're going to miss if they don't buy it. Create a sense of urgency. Create a call to action. Come on down. Call. Click. I'm serious.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is something we talked about a little bit in the pre-interview. Should the owner of a car lot appear in the commercial, and if so, what are some tips and what are some things to kind of look out for if he wants to appear in his own commercials?
Well, that's you have a lot of dealers who end up doing their own commercials. Dealers are very successful business people, and they're very proud of what they've accomplished. A lot of the dealerships are family businesses. You've been in the family for generations, And you have a lot of dealers who end up on TV, and that's great. Being your own brand is enormously powerful. Matter of fact, there's nothing more powerful than being your own brand. The problem is if you're trying to be your own brand and you don't necessarily have the charisma to carry a 30-second spot, you don't necessarily have the vocal prowess to enunciate a spot clearly, and most dealers, they aren't comfortable doing the hard sell. They're not comfortable doing, hey, we're having a great giant kid sale. Come and see us. They want to talk about, hey, my family's owned this business for 2 generations. Hey, we support the local little league and lots of things like that. And they're not really as comfortable getting out front and doing the hard sell things that they need to do to create the call to action. What I do a lot of times, if I get a dealer, and dealers end up doing their own spot more often than not because the local TV station or the local radio station, or everything, they've convinced them, they've let them on the air because people will notice them and they'll say, hey, I saw you on TV the other day. And every time someone sees them on TV, well, they didn't buy a car, but they just sold you some more TV advertising. So it's great. It's great PR for the TV station every time the dealer gets recognized. What we try to do is if I've got a dealer who wants to do his own spot, but doesn't necessarily have, the really jump out personality or the vocal prowess to pull the whole thing, I'll get him to say the tagline. Nobody beats Bob's Auto Lot. Nobody. It doesn't matter how much charisma you got. If you can say that for 5 seconds. So we'll get the dealers to create the tags at the end of the spot to create their imaging. And then we'll have the big, loud, hard sell spot with the big voice and the sound effects and the boom, bang, boom. And we'll do that for 25 seconds. And the 5 seconds at the end of the spot will be Bob saying, hey, y'all come on down to Bob's Auto Lot. The other problem is, and this happened here in Nashville, it's a funny story. We had a guy, he owned 3 Kia stores in Nashville, and he was all over the TV. And he had the personality, he had the charisma, he had movie star good looks. He had beautiful wife and kids. He had everything, and he didn't mind doing the hard sell. He came on, and he was you couldn't turn on the TV without seeing a spot with this guy on there. And then he got into a little trouble with the law, and that became the leading news story on the news for weeks on end. And all the money that he spent millions of dollars over the last couple of years building this brand with him in it, and now that's just fodder for the local newscast. And it was in every newspaper, on every newspaper, on every news story. So the thing I like to tell you is if you're going to plaster your face all over the TV, you're going to plaster your face on every billboard in town, you better make sure your nose clean if you're sick and get out there because you're going to become a target. It's like I said, being a politician, that's going to put a big target on your back.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but there's the old saying, any publicity is good publicity. Do you think even something negative like this could potentially help him sell more cars?
Well, the problem with it is just this guy, he had spent millions of dollars advertising, building the brand, and as soon as he hit the airwaves with the negative publicity, every spot that he was on got yanked off. So he's not doing the spots anymore. He ended up changing the name of the dealership strictly to disassociate himself from everything else. So no, I don't think it helped him at all. It cost him millions in new advertising and signage. So.
Yeah. So, okay. When we first started talking about doing this interview, you said, ask me about the 4 words that will determine the success of every ad you run. I think that's maybe a good way to wrap things up. Can you speak to that?
The call to action. Come see us now. You got to have a call to action in every ad, and that's what we've been talking about the whole time. The 4 words. You come on down and see us, but you got to have a call to action in everything, and that's the whole purpose of my company is instant events. We could have called the company Lancaster Advertising. We could have called it automotive advertising, but we decided early to concentrate on event advertising with something going on now and a call to action to be involved in that event, and something big is going on. So every ad is an event.
Let's go ahead and talk about your company, Instant Events. Can you kind of give us a two-minute elevator pitch on what you guys do?
My elevator pitch is anytime I meet someone who's never met me before, here's my elevator pitch. My name's Terry Lancaster. I'm the Vice President of Making Shit Happen at Instant Events Automotive Advertising. We produce the biggest, loudest automotive advertising in the history of big, loud automotive advertising. And everyone knows immediately what I'm talking about when I do it. They've seen those commercials. So that the type of advertising that you think of as the big, loud, obnoxious car ad, that's what we do, because boring advertising gets ignored.
Yeah.
Different gets noticed. So we want to be the biggest, loudest ads on the spot. We have the biggest, loudest radio spots. We have TV spots that are big. I've had one dealer described their spots as they make you drop your popcorn. They're big, they're loud, they're shiny, they're flashy. There's lots of stuff going on, and our newspaper ads, our direct mail, all looks the same way. So we try to be just we don't do any image advertising. We don't have puppy dogs. We don't use daffodils. I used to tell our dealers when we started that if we ever won an advertising award for any ad that we produce for your dealership, we'll give you a choice. You can either fire us or slap us, because we're not in the advertising award business. We're in the selling cars business. And I'm not interested in winning Addy awards. I'm not interested in impressing your friends down at the Rotary Club. I'm interested in selling cars. And we do ads that are going to sell cars. We're not trying to make you the new Chevy. We're not trying to make you popular. We're trying to sell you some more cars.
Perfect. So what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing and potentially contact you?
Well, Instant Events is on the web at instantevents.com. It's there. We blog there regularly about the things that we talk about here, how to improve your advertising. We have new ideas that pop up every month. I do a blog post every month about automotive advertising ideas for June. We got a couple of big events that you can do for your June advertising, and we talk about how to improve your advertising that you're done. So you can check us out there at instantevents.com. And I'm all over the web and social media. Just Google Terry Lancaster. I'm there, or I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Terry Lancaster. So I'm pretty easy to find. And I'm sitting here at a phone all day long at 1-800-352-3305. Call, click, or come on down.
Perfect. That's pretty much covers all bases. So Terry, you've been very generous with your time. I really appreciate your coming on the show. This has been a lot of great information.
Ashley, I'm proud to do it. Anything I can do to help, you let me know. This was great.
If you're currently looking for a high-quality auto dealer website, check out our sister site, motorcarsites.com. We offer high-quality auto dealer websites at a very affordable price. Dealers can typically save between $50 and $150 per month by using our service. You can upload as many cars as you'd like at no additional cost. We automatically can export your cars to all the major platforms like Cars.com and AutoTrader, so you don't have to manage your inventory in multiple locations. We can have your new website up and running usually in less than 24 hours. Setup is free and easy, and there are no long-term contracts, so you can cancel at any time. Again, check out motorcarsites.com to learn more. Just a quick thought on today's interview with Terry. I know a lot of the dealers that I work with are stuck in this rut where they basically just use Cars.com, AutoTrader, and Craigslist to advertise their inventory. If you're willing to be aggressive on price, you can definitely sell a good number of cars through these channels. But I get these same dealerships asking me what else they can do, and I think Terry has given out some good information about how to go about doing some offline marketing. If you can start to build a real brand name for your company, you can start to get away from this race to the bottom, which means constantly cutting price and shrinking your margins. It's not going to be cheap or easy, but diversifying your marketing channels is probably the smartest thing you can do for your company. I know from my own experience in marketing various products over the years, getting out there and trying new things is the best way you can find new channels for advertising your cars. It doesn't always work out, but even if the ROI isn't always positive, this is how new ideas are born. So that's our show. I hope you get some value out of it and it can help you grow your business. Thanks for listening.